Hello and welcome to School English Explained. For those of you that are new with us, my name is Libby Smith and I'm your adult education tutor from Coventry City Council. And I'll be your tutor for the next 6 weeks of school English, covering 2 weeks on reading, a week on spelling, one on punctuation, one on grammar, and one on writing. We got there in the end. I hope you're well. As I said at the start of all these courses, please bear with us. This whole everything being on technology is really quite new. So it may not run as smoothly as I'd like it to, but please just bear with me and I'll do the best job that I can. So let's bring up the PowerPoint and we'll make a start. Okay then, so here's my email address, should you need it. If you have any questions, queries, feedback you want to share. And the other links are to the adult education pages where you can find out about other courses that we run. There's the telephone number for the service as well. Just to give you a rundown, they're recorded sessions. They're approximately 45 minutes long. Obviously, the beauty of that being that you can pause them, rewind them as and when to suit yourself. Coventry Council promote both safeguarding and the prevent agenda. And we have a duty of care to you and need to make you aware of our obligations with regards to that. We also support the British Values, Rules for Life, which are throughout the schools in Coventry as well. The rules being around democracy, the rule of law, individuals having liberty, mutual respect and tolerance of others with the same and different faiths and beliefs to ourselves. So week 1 then, just take a moment to have a think. What's your child's favourite story? Which ones they like best? Is it from a book? Is it made up? Is it a fairy tale? Is it something you came up with one night at bedtime? What's their favourite? Is it a movie story? Okay, so each week we'll run through the objectives. This week we're going to have a think about some of the vocabulary we can use at home, how we can question and use pictures in stories, particularly with our younger children, some stories to share and some activities that you can have a go at doing at home. We have the traffic light system that we ask you to follow. If we were in face-to-face classes, we'd have diaries and you'd fill them out and mark these bits off and I could take them in and give you feedback and you could give me feedback and we could do that pre-COVID on a weekly basis. Obviously, we can't do that in this situation, but if you just make a note to yourself about where you put yourself and then at the end we do the same thing and we can just see where the progress is or isn't, and it might give you some ideas about anything extra you want to ask for, any feedback you want to give. Also throughout the slides, there'll be opportunities for you to have a think about certain things. I'll ask you to think or to make some notes, all for your own benefit, all for your own learning. It's just those icons will be there just so that you're aware. That's something that I'd like you to do to help with your understanding. So then, hearing children read, how not to do it. Okay, let's have a think. In a rush. Ever tried doing it whilst trying to get the baby to eat the cereal and all the book bags in the car and get your teeth brushed in 3 minutes before they go to school on a Monday morning? I have. Not ideal. Not while distracted. I don't know if you're trying to talk to somebody on the phone, if you're trying to get the buggy on the bus. It's difficult to listen at the same time. It's really good to give your full attention. And also want to experience not when they're overtired. Particularly when the new school year starts, they've got to get back into that pattern again. Come 5 o'clock, they can be really, really tired. And sometimes actually, do you know what? It's better to do it well than to just do it for the sake of doing it. So, if obviously we need to do it regularly, but if there's a night where you just think, this is just not the right time to do it, try and find another moment. If you get 5 minutes in the morning, maybe, or as soon as they come in from school, you gauge it for yourself. What gets in the way? I always think of the people and children, or the children in the house generally, and causing noise and distraction. Of course, other things are going on, but you really need to be able to focus to do it, which again, about not being distracted, not being in a rush, and lack of interest. Sometimes children think they find it difficult. Sometimes children don't think they like to read. Okay, sometimes they see it as being something that's in the way because we're in a rush, because we're distracted. It's worth bearing these things in mind. So then let's have a think about some of the book vocabulary children will be introduced to. The title. Well, there we go. Always be you. There's our title, nice and big on the front cover. The author, the name of the person who wrote the book, and the illustrator, the person who drew the pictures of the book. The spine, which is the bit you see when it's on a shelf, generally has the title on it as well. The author, so you can find it if it's packed away. The blurb. A few words generally on these picture books, but a little bit on the back of the book that gives you some information about what the story's about to help you to choose. Is it fiction or non-fiction? Fiction being a storybook, non-fiction being the more factual books we get. If it's non-fiction, it should have a contents page, an index, and a glossary. Those are key features of non-fiction books. Right then, reading requires two skills. We need to be able to read the words, and we need to be able to understand them. Okay, comprehension. We need to be able to understand what we've read. So the motor bit, reading each word, but without understanding it, without being able to process it, we might as well be reading another language. Scarborough's rote model looks at how these two strands tied together. So word reading, it's the letter sound knowledge. It's about decoding and automaticity in decoding. It's about when children get faster with it, okay? So rather than having to do cat, they learn cat. They do it in their head almost, I guess. And that goes along with the language comprehension. So they need the robotics of reading, but they also need to be able to activate word meanings. They hear a word, they know what it means. They understand sentences. So it's not word by word, they get the gist, if you like. They make inferences. We do more on that next week in school reading, but that's where we hear something, and from that, it gives us more detail. We can begin to see what might be coming. We can begin to make predictions. We can begin to see what that could lead to. Monitoring comprehension and understanding the structure of text. Okay, all these things tying together. So comprehension, let's find out a little bit more about that. We've got a video, two videos actually for us to have a look at. If they'll come up, where are we? Okay. Let's have a look at this one together.
Reading comprehension is the ability to read a written text and understand its meaning. It relies on two interconnected abilities: word reading, being able to decode the words on the page, and language comprehension, being able to understand the meaning of those words, whether they're written down or just spoken. To read well, both abilities need to be taught and developed. When we read, we don't normally remember the exact words and phrases of the entire text. Instead, we build a mental model, a picture in our head of what's happening and what the text is telling us. The planet glowed brightly in the night sky. Our mental model grows as we read more of the text. We add to it or change it as we come across new ideas and new information. The clearer our mental model, the better our understanding of the whole text. And there are 4 factors that can help this model to grow: background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, and inference. As we read, we connect the ideas and information in the text with our existing knowledge. If we've read other books about space or seen films about space travel, then we're likely to meet familiar ideas when we read another book set in space. For example, if the text says, "With a crunch, a rocket touched down on the planet's rocky surface. The door of the ship slid open. Glancing nervously from side to side, an astronaut stepped onto the ground." We're told directly that the door opened and the astronaut left the rocket, but we have to use our background knowledge of astronauts and space travel to imagine what the astronaut looks like and what they're wearing. Knowing the meaning of the words we're reading is obviously very important for good comprehension. If we come across a new or unfamiliar word, we can use different strategies to ensure we still understand its meaning. The astronaut took out an aeromometer and began scanning. Aeromometer. I've not heard that word before. To work out the meaning, we might use the context. Here, the aeromometer could be some sort of technical device, as it's being used to scan for something. We might also check similar words to get clues. Aero sounds like it might be to do with the air. A meter sounds like a measuring device, like in thermometer or barometer. So, aeromometer, might be a tool for measuring the air. Words on their own aren't necessarily enough to build understanding. It's not until we join them together that we can get a sense of their meaning. No result came from the device, so the astronaut waited. Here, understanding that the conjunction so means that one thing is the reason for another thing happening helps us to understand the sentence. The astronaut can't do anything before they get the result. A different conjunction would have given a very different meaning. No result came from the device while the astronaut waited. The use of the conjunction while suggests that although there was no immediate result, a result did come later. Often, good comprehension depends on understanding quite small details, such as knowing the meaning of a conjunction, so or while, or recognizing exactly what a pronoun is referring to. It began to make a whirring sound. We need to know that the pronoun it is the anemometer in order to follow what's happening. It's rare for a text to tell the reader everything they need to know. Often we have to infer or read between the lines to picture what's going on. Finally, a light on the display flashed green. The astronaut pressed a button on the helmet and the visor began to lift. In the story, we can work out, infer, that the astronaut lifts the visor on the helmet because the planet's atmosphere is safe. The text doesn't tell us this, but we use our background knowledge of what a green light normally means to infer that it's signaling to the astronaut, okay, safe to take off the helmet. As it happens, the next line confirms the inference we made. Knowing that the air was safe to breathe, Captain Sarah of the Starship Endeavour was ready to begin her adventure in space. While each of the factors that help with comprehension can be taught and practiced directly, the best way to develop language comprehension is through talking, listening, and reading as often and as widely as possible. In this way, children's reading will really take off. So if you'll excuse me, I've got some important work to do.
Quite a long video, but I think it explains quite nicely point. And this one gives us a little bit more about how to support children at home with reading. And here's a couple of activities. I won't play the whole thing, it's quite long. You're quite welcome to follow the link yourself, but this gives some ideas on how you can help your children with comprehension.
Okay, we're going to play Snap. Okay, so do you want to turn our card over? Boiling. Okay, I've got Smooth. No. What have you got there? Hot. Okay. I've got Dinky. I've got Beef.
Snap.
Oh, beating them. Right, okay, so you get to keep those cards.
Okay.
You turn over a card. What have you got now?
Green.
I've got Rum.
Snap.
Oh, beat me again. I've got no cards on.
I won.
You did win.
So that's just an example of one activity whereby you can make some snap cards, so words that mean the same thing. So he had sprint and run there and he snapped them. Another nice way of practicing some of these skills in a less explicit way. The children enjoy it, their games, but they're still learning. As I said, there's a longer video there that you can watch. So reading at home, it's important to enjoy it. Okay, you need to make reading visible. If you've got books at home, try and have some on display. I don't have a very big bookshelf. We don't really have room for it, but we have a box that we keep in the bedroom, in the children's bedroom, that's got a number of favourite books at the moment in them. They're there and ready to use, they're accessible. Try and share books every day. It might be at bedtime, it might be something you do at another point in the day. It doesn't have to be at a fixed time in the day, but just try and make a point of sharing the books every day. It's important to remember that children need to see men reading as well. We quite often think about women reading, and whether that be reading fiction books, reading because they're at home or have been at home more traditionally. It's really important for children to see that men are reading too. Particularly, it helps boys with that. Talk about books and sit and listen. If your child's reading to you, sit and listen to them. Pay them your attention. Okay. make this as important an activity as it is. Okay, reading's everywhere and we're doing it all of the time, but if we don't instill the right things in children when they're small, the quality of how they can do it can be affected. Let's give it the time it deserves. It feeds into everything that they'll come to do further on, so it is really important. Quite an interesting little cartoon here, a lady on a phone next to a child on a phone talking to a lady who's reading next to her child who's reading. It says, so how do you get your kids to read? And it's this idea of modelling. It's this idea that if they see you do it, they'll do it. Okay. And just to remember, there's no harm if you do use a Kindle or an e-reader of some sort to read your books. That's fine. It's just kind of good to make it explicit to your kids that you're reading, though. Don't let them think you're just watching TV or, I don't know, paying the bills. Let them know that you're reading and that it can be used for that too. Very important. Okay, so closed and open questions. Closed questions. Here's an example. Do you like this book? Do you like this character? Is it a good story? Do you like reading? Are you good at reading? Do you like this kind of story? These are all closed questions, okay? Basically, the answer that we give is yes or no to a closed question. Very short answers, yes or no. Okay. Open questions, however, generate far more discussion, far more vocabulary, far more involvement, far more explanation. Okay. What do you like about this book? What do you think of this character? Why do you think this is a good story? Yes or no wouldn't cut it with those ones, okay? I like this book because this character is really naughty, especially when, okay, you're given plenty of opportunity to string out, to pull out as much information as possible, as much understanding and comprehension as possible, as much of the ideas of the children. And again, this is all good for talking, okay? This is all good for communication skills too. What's great about reading? Why are you a good reader? What is it about these stories that you like so much? Really positive questions. Okay. Now, Hand of Surprise is a story that has been around quite a long time and is, again, a real good one that's used quite often in the early years foundation stage. And it's the story of a girl called Handa. Let's have a look at it together. Let's watch this one together.
Just for Kids TV.
Hand of Surprise by Eileen Brown.